I am super excited today because well, first of all, I always love when I have more than one guest on at the same time because then the conversation just goes great. But Matt and I have a long history. David is just kind of I've adopted him, but very much from the beginning, I don't. I guess I've loved the concept from the very beginning. I'll rephrase that entirely. And what I'm going to have you guys do is David will have you start. Let's talk about what is helped.
Gosh. Okay, so Helped is outsourced help desk. It's fractional support agents. It's the idea of saying, hey, I need to fill a gap. I don't know how to do it. Let me see if I can find a partner. And Helped is that partner. It came about because Matt and I were both working at a company that sold transceivers into data centers. These little widgets that hardly broke, but when they did, they were mission critical. And so we ended up having to promise our customers that we could do these insane things like 24/7, 30-second or less answer times, or, picking up P1 tickets within a couple of minutes. And we continually needed to fill gaps. And so we saw a huge market need for it. We had the great fortune of being able to go off and do it on our own. And we built Helps.
Well, that makes me ask. So I'll direct this to Matt. What was the trigger that made you decide? You know what? Let's just go and do this ourselves. Because people do work in companies, and it's just that you kind of in the back of your mind think you can do that. But what was the thing for you that actually triggered the whole thing?
So we have a lot of funny stories about pain points at the old business. David has a good one about a time he had to take a call from the blackjack table in Vegas where because we sold hardware and our parts never failed. We had a 1 in 10,000 failure rate. It was completely unrealistic for us to have 24/7 staffing because
Mm,
99.9% of the time our staff was going to be sitting on their hands. So of course we weren't allowed to staff for that. We just needed to find somebody competent, technical, capable of doing it. We struggled with that. And it's one of those things, how many businesses are born of the idea of that this is the thing that we need and nobody offers it. We should go do it ourselves. So, we
exactly.
were fortunate. Our business when we joined it was a small business, privately held, and a couple of the original owners were looking to spend a little more time on the golf course, make an exit. That
Hmm.
led to us going down the PE road. We went through those cycles where we got acquired. Our PE backers that
Oh, for
actually
sure.
acquired a competitor of ours shortly before merged us together. Went through a very exciting growth phase, and then finally made their exit to a strategic acquirer. And when that happened, we were fortunate enough to have some liberties. We could have chosen to stay and worked the more corporate job. And when we started the company, it was very much not corporate. We'd gotten more professional over the years, but then to become part of a 15,000 person organization, it's a different atmosphere. And I think we both appreciate the small business mentality, that the nimbleness of working at a small business, not being quite so stuffy and by the book on everything.
Hmm.
So then when we had the opportunity to go and do something that we knew there was market demand for, we thought we could take the chance to build a business in our image. We loved the people that we used to work with, but like any business, anytime when you're not the boss, there's something that you disagree with, there's something that they're doing wrong and they should do it the way that I think. And it's our chance to impress that, to build the business as we think the business should run. We could only do so much to influence culture of the old business. So as much as we're passionate about providing support and the things that we're doing in that regard, our cogs, our deliverable is people. It's human capital, and so culture is more important in what we're doing today than in any business we've ever been involved in,
Nice.
especially because help desk is inherently kind of negative. I don't know if we swear on this podcast, but it's kind of a shitty job to have because you're always in the line of fire. Like you're always stuck in the middle. You can't control the environment,
But
but you
people
have to
come to you
fix
so
it.
happy.
So fortunately, like we're not taking the level one calls anymore. So business is good enough that we don't have to. There was a time when
Of course, of
we
course.
were waking up. I mean, David, I think, had a string of 36 straight days of being woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning to take a call. Fortunately, we're past that, but we need our technicians to be positive because it's all about the customer experience. They need to be happy on the phone so that they're able to
Absolutely.
give the person who's calling what they need. And so we have focused so much on building a culture of positivity of having a good work environment for people who, like what they're doing. They're in support because they are technical people. They enjoy working with people. It's the sort of environment they want to be in, but it's not necessarily always a positive environment. And so we try to make it as positive as we can. And so for us to have the chance to do that, to build this universe we all get to live in, it was really exciting for us.
I love that because just like you said, when people have IT problems, they are not in their best place. They're frustrated, and frustration is a really tough place to be into because you feel so helpless and things like that. And I love that you're touching on, the culture is what's really important because you want that person on the other end to just basically say, "We're going to fix this." That's all it is we're going to fix this. So just kind of hang on, and we'll talk you through this. And that's ultimately what people want. And I love that you are saying that specifically, which is going to lead kind of into my next question. Is in a way that kind of makes you special and unique. But David, I want you to kind of expand on that because I always like to know, I mean, there are other companies, there's other choices that people can make. And we've already touched upon that, you're going to get a pleasant person, but what is it that really does make your company different than another sort of company that would help people with IT?
So I feel like we're kind of in between a couple of well-known and well-adopted offerings that are out there. There's call answering services, and call answering services have been around for forever. That's the doctor's office saying, "Hey, I need somebody to pick up the phone at whatever time, tell the person that called in that they need to call the hospital if they need to call the hospital, or grab a message." On the other side, there's this idea of like fully outsourcing your team or fully outsourcing to like staff aug or dedicated heads or whatever it might be. And this side where we're doing that full outsourcing, it's prohibitively expensive. On the other side, you're really not getting everything that you need from the engagement.
Correct.
You can only deliver a handful of warm and fuzzies to somebody if you're just taking a message. And so we're kind of in the middle where it's fractional. We're going to deliver those warm and fuzzies, but we're also going to be technical enough to understand what's going on. Call a call answering service, they have no idea what's going on. Call somebody that's a dedicated head, it's going to cost $1 bazillion and they'll know what's going on, but it doesn't really work. And so we're kind of in between.
So let's build on that a little bit. So who would the ideal client be for you? And either of you can kind of jump in on that.
So when we started, so again, we came from a hardware manufacturer and kind of envisioned that the sort of B2B support as being our initial focus. Then we kind of stumbled into the world of MSPs, managed service providers. Those are the folks that are already doing outsourced IT. So if you're an accounting office, a doctor's office, you need somebody to manage your IT and you need them to do everything for you. That's what an MSP does. And MSPs have the level 1 help desk. They have the people who take the call, who help you reset your password, fix your printer, figure out that Excel issue or why your emails aren't sending. But they're also so much more because they're doing your cybersecurity, your network infrastructure, all those sort of things. So we don't do all the stuff that an MSP does. We're not proactive like that, telling you what your IT needs to look like. But that MSP still needs people to provide that support. As well, the natural extension from there is there are larger organizations that have what they call co-managed relationships with an MSP. So there might be a 1,000-person organization that has an IT team, but still outsources some of the decision-making to an MSP. But a lot of larger organizations, the 1,000-person, 500-person organization, they have an IT department. They don't really need to outsource the decision-making. They just need to outsource the labor, the boots on the ground. They need somebody to be there to take those tickets, take those calls when they come in. So our ideal is somebody who is dealing with that scale. The nature of what we do is unpredictable. You don't know when the printer's going to break. Mondays are a little bit predictable because for some reason people take the weekend off and forget their password every time. So Mondays are always a little bit busier than Friday. But if you know that, your ticket volume is X on a Monday and it's way down here at Y on a Friday, how do you staff for that? You can hire the full-time person to sit on their hands on a Friday, or you can try to find a part-time person who's just there on a Monday and Tuesday and not there on a Thursday and Friday. And so our ideal is somebody that's dealing with those staffing issues, that regular HR type challenges of how do you account for keeping your team engaged efficiently? How do you get value out of these hires? Any of those sorts of businesses where they're supporting I'd say at least, 100 plus endpoints generally, whether that's internal users, whether that's, an MSP supporting a variety of clients, or even if your product is a B2B or B2C type products where you have a number of customers out in the field, if you need to provide that sort of unpredictable support, if you can't staff for it because you know that it's going to be calls coming in on an assembly line, then we're the perfect fit for you because we're the sort of gap fillers. We make it so that your business can scale without you needing to sweat how you're going to handle the support that goes along with it.
Yeah, and I think that's great because obviously everybody always looks at the bottom line on some things, and nobody wants to be the person that just is hanging out. It's like, yeah, I don't do anything on my job, laugh, laugh. But after about 3 weeks of that, it becomes a nightmare because I'm sure we've all had a job like that at one time. You're like, I just wish I had something to do. And then not be burnt out on Monday, if you will. So, and this is a great way to kind of pace it out. And so would you say, are you like in like that middle range size company or not? And I don't want to pigeonhole you because obviously if a large company calls you like, we're going to make this work, but there is kind of a sweet spot. What do you think that is for you guys?
I would say we're sub enterprise. To your point,
nice.
yes, if some major 30,000 employee company calls us and wants us to support them, we are absolutely going to do it. But by and large, we're working at a scale below that. When you get down to a certain smaller size, then we are more directly competing with our MSP clients. And so that's not necessarily where we want to be. If that doctor's office calls us up and says, hey, our IT infrastructure is already in place, we just want somebody to take the calls, maybe not a perfect fit. But if it's a larger healthcare provider that just wants to ensure that its nurses can have their passwords reset round the clock so that there's no disruption in dispensing medication, we're going to be a strong fit for that. So, I'd say 100 seats on up to that, whatever you define enterprise at, just that sub enterprise level.
Super. I think that gives it a great understanding. Okay, so we're going to move on to my next question, which is, a little more fun, although it's always fun talking about our companies too. But I am kind of curious as to, and I'll start with you, David. What did you do when you were a kid that was really fun? Summer, feet hit the ground, no school. What were you doing?
So I would say something outside, even though I grew up in Arizona and it was 120 degrees out every day. I think there was a lot of biking, there was a lot of baseball, and there was a lot of just physical activity, something to kind of like get the willies out and go and do fun things. Back then, I'm not that old, but back then my parents said, hey, come on home by 6 o'clock. And so we kind of had free range over the summer. So that was the kind of.
What did you really like about that? What was just got you so excited?
I think it was just the freedom, the overall idea that, hey, if we wanted to go to the convenience store and grab a Gatorade or something like that, we could do that. If we wanted to go to a friend's house, we could go and do that. I think that freedom aspect was really the key for me.
Very cool. Very cool entrepreneur, freedom. Matt, how about you?
Well, so you mentioned summers, and so I grew up in Ohio. I think Arizona is probably 120 in the summer and probably 102 in the winter. Ohio was a little bit different. So during the summers, yeah, similarly, outdoors. When I was a kid, especially biked everywhere, just miles and miles around.
Isn't that hilarious?
Yeah.
I know you have kids now. What would you think if one of your children said, "I'm just going to go bike about 5 miles away"?
I've thought about that. Our oldest is 6 now, and I've wondered how much at what point she'll get more freedom. Does it need to be that she's a 16-year-old, 18-year-old, whatever she gets her driver's license, that when she'll have that freedom? Or will there be a point where she's 12 years old and she has her friends and they kind of do their thing? We have some friends who their youngest is just older than our oldest, and their older two are in that age now where the oldest is around 12 and the youngest is something like 9 and kind of has that freedom to go and do that thing. And it makes me nervous, but to David's point, like, it was such a valuable experience that I wouldn't want to deprive them of that. It's tough because where do kids go at this point? So
we go, really, when you think about it, because I was the same thing. And I do want to focus back on you and what you did, because I did kind of divert a little bit. But so you were riding bikes miles and
a lot of swimming. I was at the pool a lot. I always had a great tan. I don't know how I didn't get burned to a crisp all the time. But especially when I was really younger and we did summer camp. Summer camp kind of devolved into going to the pool at least after camp. So I would just spend hours when I was a really strong swimmer, actually, when I was young. And then winters were a little bit different. So also you get to springtime, especially when I got towards the end of high school, I was not a great student. I wasn't always present for class. I would often cut to go frisbee golfing. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, really?
I still have some of my old discs around here somewhere. I actually found them when I was cleaning up not too long ago. But then during the winters, it was a lot of computers. I feel like I was one of the first on the block with a computer, and I was always into video games and things like that, tinkering with the newest technology back then. So that was a good way for me to kind of spend my time. I'd like to argue that it was educational in a way. There was a lot of, exploring new frontiers. The internet then
Absolutely.
wasn't what it is today. So there's a lot of figuring stuff out, how to make stuff work. And so it was a lot of, sort of problem solving. So even though it was free time, even though video games are, degeneracy, they're not good for you, whatever, there was a lot of development that was involved. So it wasn't such a bad thing.
I would have to agree with you. And I think just because it was new and different, it scared our parents. But honestly, there was just so much problem solving and stuff like that. I mean, what was that one? It was like Dragon Slayer or something. You had to like try and find the key. It's like very early on. But you had to figure out, okay, I'm in this room. Now, how the heck do I get
Yeah.
to the next level and things like that? So I'm going to join you in that argument where I do think it was very educational and did also, if anything, I think really kind of elevated you to where you needed to be today. In hindsight, it is 2020. And it's like, if I didn't do that, then I don't think I could be
Yeah.
here. And it's speaking directly to that freedom too.
There
You
wasn't instruction, so you kind of had to figure something out.
exactly.
Now we've started a business, and yeah, there's the internet, there's all sorts of resources about what you should do. But every
Hmm.
business is a little bit different, a little bit unique. There's no real guidebook for how to do it. And if I didn't have that experience when I was young, figuring out, being willing to throw the stuff against the wall and see what works and being willing to iterate and try
Exactly.
again, if I didn't have that experience and the comfort in doing that, we couldn't be managing a business now.
Exactly. And I think once you kind of taste that freedom too, then you really kind of know what your goal is eventually in life. It's like, I kind of want to get back to that feeling again because it was pretty cool.
Exactly.
Now, David, what do you do now that allows you to unplug? You obviously, and this is, to the side. I always tell people, you need to have this balance. But when you do start up a company, it is pretty much you are officially in the grind. And like you said, answering the phone at 3 a.m, no matter where the heck you were, that's just part of it. But you've grown a little more, and now I'm hoping you have a little more chance to enjoy life. So, what are the things that you choose to do to kind of unplug and just kind of give your brain a rest for a little bit?
So I'll say it's about 25% video games still.
That's
A
funny.
lot of Animal Crossing. Don't know if you ever got into that, but that's a fun time. And then reading. I'd say that's where the other time goes.
Is
Um,
that fiction or nonfiction or self-help or what
that's a good
is
question.
it?
So much like Matt, I wasn't a stellar student. Go figure. And I'd never read the things that I was supposed to read. And so now, I've gone through my old high school curriculum, and I hear stories about these books that you're supposed to read, and those are the first ones that I want to read.
Oh, that's
I read
interesting.
the Giver recently. The Giver story. Like that's apparently one you're supposed to read in like middle school, and I
Yeah,
never
yeah,
read it.
yeah.
So I read it. Right now, I'm reading something. Matt got me on the Dune series, so I'm a little bit Dune here with what I'm doing.
Nice,
But then
nice.
now I'm reading a horror, which was the first time I've ever done that. But it's a lot of fun.
I love that. I love that. And I'm definitely gonna, I mean, it's such an easy way to unplug reading because it doesn't cost anything if you even go to the library and get the books, so it's very low low point of entry to get into that. But I love that you mentioned things that were not, and I threw out like self-help because some people do just spend the time, I got all these business books I got to read, and you're like, but do you?
Right,
Do you
right.
have to read those? I think fiction and fantasy and all that sort of stuff is so great because that's what really does challenge you. Going back to almost the video game thing too.
And
Exactly.
then David, what's on the wall behind you?
Those are baseball cards.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so I do a little
So
bit of baseball card collection,
got a little bit of thing for that. Cool.
just a little bit.
What do you
And
like about what do you like about collecting the baseball cards? Do you do it for the value, the game? What is it that kind of draws you to that?
A little bit of all that. I've got a little bit of a gambler in me, so I like the idea of opening packs and finding
Oh, no, you
cards.
don't.
Yes, yes.
Okay, no, cool.
So that's kind of what you see up there. A lot of those things are things that I pulled out of a pack myself or
Very cool.
found break or whatever. So yeah,
Oh, you're
it's
so on
fun.
trend right now. That's just the hot
Well,
thing right
thank you,
now. Is
thank you.
those packs.
So right. So I wanted to go back to the reading thing, and I
Oh,
just a
yes.
little bit. So for me, I found that it takes me a couple of pages to really get back into the groove, and so my mind is going, 1,000 miles an hour, and I say, all right, I've got time to unwind. I can unplug, and I'll lay down or I'll sit down and I'll open that book, and I'll get 2 pages in before my brain starts to change into the book. For the first 2 pages, I'm thinking about, well, did we do that thing right? Did we do that thing wrong? Did we forget to do that thing? What happened during the day? But
Yeah,
after
yeah.
about, those first 2 pages, I start to really lose myself. And so that's the real unwind piece. First 2 pages, awful. Everything after that, I'm ready to
I
go.
give you credit because that usually takes me longer than that sometimes so, to finally get into it. And then if I'm not into it by the second chapter, then I just give up on it. So I don't care about these people, and I just have to get rid of it. But if it's well written, it can grab me. But I want to highlight that a little bit because sometimes people might think, I don't have the focus to read.
Mhm.
Just you got to give it a minute for sure. Give it a few pages.
Settle into it.
I think for me, reading is almost like therapeutic. The way David's describing how it allows you to stop thinking about all those things you were worried about. For me, it's the only way I can
Exactly.
get to sleep a lot of the time is because I turn off my brain from the day of work by immersing myself in the book that I'm reading. So similarly, it's more fiction than nonfiction because it lets you go to a different world where you don't need to worry about whether you did that thing, sent the email, or
Exactly.
whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm 100% behind that too because and that's why I think like you said we're talking about just the fiction is even more important is just to kind of get caught up in someone else's story out of your own story that's going on in your head and just give it a break and you just feel so and I love that you use the word therapeutic because I think that is really kind of spot on too. What else do you do besides read, Matt?
So you mentioned what we did when we were younger. So one thing I got into when I was 13 or 14 years old was Magic the Gathering. My dad was actually a big collector. He had a baseball
Hmm.
card and comic book store, and he had Magic cards when that came out. And I got into that some, and it didn't play it much for the longest time. And then again, I picked it up a little bit, and then didn't play it for the longest time. And I think the last time I touched a paper card was 2017 or something. But again, talking about video games, the newest Magic the Gathering set, this is like a little promotion for them because they need the free advertising, was
Maybe
a
they'll send you something free.
crossover. Yeah, it was a crossover with a video game series called Final Fantasy, which I really liked
Oh
as
yeah, I've
a
heard of
kid.
that.
So for the first time in nearly a decade, I went and played paper magic at the local store this past weekend, and that was fun. It was a challenge for my wife to wrangle the kids for the 5 hours while I was away, but I had a lot of fun getting over there and playing that. And it's one of those things where the combination of young children in the business, it's hard to have any sort of consistent hobby. One
Yeah.
thing I've tried to be a little consistent with is exercise. If nothing else, I do a rowing class every week,
Oh, good for you.
just as a way to try to have a release of some sort. Because I think the mental release is important, but also having a physical
Hmm.
release is pretty important. But I would love to cultivate some more recurring hobbies as well. And as much as I'm not the most social person, I appreciate the opportunities to socialize.
Hmm.
I appreciate kind of being thrust in that environment. So as much as I could also just go on my laptop and play Magic online nowadays, I really enjoy getting face to face with some other people. So
Yes.
I don't know how well I'll be able to follow through on that, but I look forward to trying to cultivate more hobbies like that.
And
One,
how'd you do this weekend?
well, here, let me hang on. I won a big stack of packs as a prize.
Oh,
Wow.
nice.
I was first. I was tied for first place. The way it works is you play 4 matches, and I won all 4 of my matches. Me and one other person won all of our matches. So
Oh, dang.
I got the prize for that. So it's exciting. Um, Unlike David, though, I'm not a collector. I think probably because my dad was such a collector, and because my
Oh,
mom,
yeah,
bless her
yeah.
heart, still has a lot of my dad's stuff in her basement. I just don't, I want everything digital. I don't want to keep, CDs. I want them all to be MP3s. I don't want to keep books. I want them all on my Kindle. Part of me says I won't really get into magic just because I don't want to have all the cards
All the
sitting around.
stuff,
I just
yeah.
want everything totally, totally digital because I want the kind of minimalist thing rather than just having piles and piles of stuff. But at the same time, David and I are going to take a road trip cross country back to Ohio and then spend a couple weeks going through my mom's basement, seeing all the cool stuff because he's the
Oh,
he's the collector
wow.
now. He knows what we need to do. Um,
And how to sell it.
how to sell it. Yeah, we need to get it all graded. Like this is going to be
Yeah,
a
yeah,
clash
yeah.
of hobbies. It's going to
Oh
be like
my
my
gosh.
childhood hobby with his adult hobby turning into additional funding for the business, I guess. I don't know.
Or
Like there's probably
something.
some
Or what's
valuable stuff there.
maybe it's a nice trip. Since it was your dad's thing, you could go. Dad, we're going on a trip, and this is all because of you, sort of thing. I mean, it could be anything, or or something towards your families, or something like that. I
Yeah,
think that would make him
exactly.
so happy. But I love that you're doing that. That is so freaking cool, and I can't even imagine what's in there. I mean, because your dad was legit when it came to that. I love too that you guys were talking about such a variety of different things, both, reading and physical things and stuff like that. So I think it's really, really clear. And I'm hoping that it helps other people, like I said, kind of connect the dots as far as, what you can do to just get out of your own head, which when you own a business or you're any sort of business leader, there's just so much. There's so much. And when you think about, opportunities when people get all stressed out, they're like, I got to take a walk, and it's as simple as that sometimes. But you have given some great examples too of other things. And I have to highlight that because those are some things that no one has ever brought up in my podcast in some cases. So I think that is really kind of cool too. It's just great to see what people do to just kind of unplug and then they're able to kind of capture, everything that they need to get back into the business and hit that hard again. So.
I do think it's important to have something to rejuvenate your mind, something to rejuvenate your body. It's just you will get worn down. Yes, you need to put in the time. It never turns off, it never stops, but there's ways to restore yourself. I also feel as though I need to mention another hobby of mine, something that I don't do often enough, but I do cook on a regular basis.
Oh, nice.
And I would argue that when I was young, I didn't really cook at all. And maybe some of the early inspiration for what eventually led me down the path of cooking. So some years back, I decided coming back to California after Thanksgiving that I wanted to make my own Thanksgiving dinner because I always enjoyed having Thanksgiving dinner at people's houses and I never got to cook any of the stuff myself. It's always special dishes you make just
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
Thanksgiving. And we've now done that sort of Friendsgiving meal over a dozen times. And every year we're kind of rotating through the recipes. There's always a turkey. There's always 10 dishes that we're making. And typically what we do is we'll pick two or three staples that we always kind of go back to, and
Mm-hmm,
then a
mm-hmm.
lot of newer dishes. And one of those staples, especially probably the first 5 years, I don't think we broke the streak once, was this sweet potato dish that had a sort of like candied nut crust that I
Yes.
remembered
I was wondering
having
if this was going to come up.
my freshman year in college when I was at Ohio State and I went locally in Columbus to somebody's house for a nice Thanksgiving dinner, and so thank you, Kathy, for the inspiration.
I'm glad it lives on and has brought such joy to other people. Perhaps I
I'd
will
like to
have
thank
that
you.
recipe online, so people can partake into that.
And
The
David, as a frequent
it is a
attendee,
crowd pleaser
he
for
can yeah
sure.
he can attest that it's good.
Fantastic. And this whole time, I knew exactly where Matt was going with that story, and my mouth was watering just thinking about it. Like 3 minutes of teasing about those. Oh, it's delicious.
Oh my goodness, you guys are too kind. You're too kind, and you're so kind for doing this too. But I, as you know, have been a cheerleader from the beginning with you two. The minute you said the idea, I was like, you know what? Yeah, people need this. And the fact that you two were heading it up, and I spoke to you early, and I was like, oh my God, they're going to totally do this, and they're going to knock it out of the park. So I'm glad that it is happening. It is happening. And then you were able to come back here and talk a little bit about your journey on that. So thank you so much for being here today. And I wish you guys nothing but luck. It's been great watching you.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate the support and all the well wishes.